Hi, everyone. And today for Together What If, we're starting a new series where we're going to discuss the inner longings of our heart, what I call inner drivers, and the things that are beyond ourselves that give meaning and significance to life. So I'm going to just label these out for you, and we're going to spend the summer months kind of talking about this in depth. Justice, spirituality, relationships, freedom, beauty, truth, power, and love. And we're going to be talking about how does the Christian faith intersect and give us vision into how to live into these longings. So over the course of the summer months, this is what we're going to be talking about. We're kind of basing our discussion off, of course, the Bible, but we're also the Gospel of John, but we're also using N.T. Wright's book called Broken Signposts. So all of these we're going to be talking about. There are longings, but they're broken. And how is the Christian faith intersecting with that and sort of bringing them into restoration? So it's kind of deep, but I think we're going to have a good time. Today, we're starting with justice.
Bum, bum, bum.
Okay, so justice. This word gets thrown around a lot right now. Social media, in the church. I want to hear what you think. If somebody just says, Jenny, what's justice? What are you saying?
Yeah. Justice is not a hashtag or a black square on your Instagram page. I think justice more specifically is about being present with the people on the margins or people experiencing suffering at the hands of people in power or systems in power.
Okay.
Sometimes, though, justice is uncomfortable. I think so. Justice is a movement of love expressed through action.
Oh, okay. What do you think, Jamie?
No, I think that's a good answer. Justice is a movement of love expressed through action. And we're going to talk about that today, that action part of it. But I think if you had to simplify it and really drill down on it, to me, it is the world being made right.
Okay.
And in order for the world to be made right means that we have to address all the things that are not right about our world.
Yeah, because it's easy to see if you look around. Things
Exactly.
are not right. I mean, there's children starving, there's homelessness, mental health issues, war, oppression. So if it's not right, it seems to be almost like this wait and see kind of thing. Like, when will it be right? So how do we answer this longing of the heart where we want fairness to be built into the fabric of the universe?
Mm-hmm.
I
think anything, even I grew up with two brothers, so we're always stealing one another's toys. And so, instinctively you heard that's not fair, right? You heard that. So, there's something in us. So I think anytime we say those words, it's not fair, particularly as adults now, and we look at the way the world is at work and we say that tells me that there is a longing in us for the world to be made right. I think ultimately we all want the world to be made right. And so, but with N.T. Wright, there's a brokenness that exists that we have to address as well. It can't just be, I want to make the world right, because we're sometimes can be selfish people, right?
That's right.
And so that sometimes gets in the way of that.
So how does it look for someone who's trying to intentionally be a Christian, a good person? They come to church. Do they have to go be a missionary? What do they have? What do they do to be a person who helps bring justice?
There's a really good story about Mother Teresa having an encounter with someone, and there's this wealthy woman that comes to India to visit Mother Teresa, and she whips out her checkbook, ready to write a check to support the work that she's doing, that Mother Teresa is doing. And she says, I want to write you a check. And Mother Teresa just shakes her head and says, no, I don't want your money. And the woman's stunned. She's like, you're telling me you don't want money. Like, you never hear that, right? You don't want money? And Mother Teresa smiled, took the woman by her hand to the place in the heart of that little village. And she came upon a malnourished child. And Mother Teresa said to the wealthy woman, you take care of her. And so the wealthy woman got down on her hands and knees, took a cloth, bathed the child, took a spoon, fed the child. And Mother Teresa came back to her and said, you don't have to write a check to participate in my work. I think the actual quote says something along the lines of, you don't have to go to Calcutta to share in the work of mission. Calcutta is wherever you are.
Okay.
You are supposed to be participating in the mission wherever you are. Wherever you are, there are people who are hurting.
Okay.
And so they don't always just need your money. More than anything, they need you to be there.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that story, and I think who was more changed in that story? The child who was fed changed for a moment, perhaps, but the woman, from just being there and near, is changed. And I think you're saying something there. Be there. Mm-hmm. All right. So what we say is you got to show up.
100%.
Show up. And Brian Stevenson is he's the equal justice guy, and that was life changing for me. Life changing. Read his book and then saw the documentary, and he just said, get proximate.
Yes.
Get proximate. And so what you sense in your heart that God is calling you to say, that's not right. You don't go in to make it right. You just go get proximate. Mm-hmm. And you let God make things right. Because if things were going to be all right already, they would be all right already, right? And so for me, that's probably the hardest thing about justice is just waiting for it, And but it's always been that way. I mean, God is always, there's this arc from the Old Testament all the way through. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we see it showing up early on in the Bible. The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. And it says, Pharaoh was a heavy taskmaster, and I love the scripture. It says that God heard their cries. I mean, that God really leaned in and heard the cries of the people. Mm-hmm. And as a response to that, God acts. Yeah. And he sends Moses. And if you know the story, God sends Moses and Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, you got to let my people go. And it took 10 tries, but eventually it happened.
Yeah.
And but I think from the very beginning, then we see God as a God who identifies with the oppressed. That God identifies with the cries of the hurting. Mm-hmm. And that's the character of the God that we understand as Christians, right? It carries all the way into the New Testament, and our God is bruised and battered body on a cross for our sake. So it's this line of that. So our God always identifies with the oppressed and the broken.
And it makes me wonder too, when you say that, earlier on in the Israelite history in Egypt, Pharaoh took advantage of the famine and became super powerful. So I wonder, where does power and justice run afoul of one another? Do you know what I mean? It's like you might think, they all say every revolutionary becomes a tyrant.
Yes.
If they have unchecked power. What you thought you were fighting for justice. And then the next thing you know, you were the hoarder of justice and you don't give it away.
Well, and isn't that part of the journey of the Israelites, right? I mean, once they are, brought into the promised land and given some freedom and given some power, and then all of a sudden, and I think it's more about self-preservation than anything else. I think, we may intentionally do it, sometimes unintentionally, but the idea is this: we have this sort of scarcity mentality that we have way of approaching life, and I've got to hoard what is mine, and that becomes more important than neighborly love.
Yeah, and the trust in God just completely breaks down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It makes me think of this story that Jesus tells in the New Testament. It's one of his parables, and he tells the people around him, who are going to be mostly people who know the law really well, people who are like really good church going kind of people. And he's telling the story about this person who got beat up and robbed and left on the side of the road to die. And so like these high holy people walk by the person on the side of the road ready to die. And instead of like going and helping that person on the side of the road, they just go to the other side of the road and pass that person by. And that happens 2 or 3 times. But then this person comes along and they have the patience to be present. Mm-hmm. And through their patience to be present, they go to the person and bandages that person's wounds, takes them into the city to the closest hotel, and tells the hotel keeper, like, whatever, here's money, whatever they need, take care of them. If I owe you more when I pass back through the town, I'll pay you what I owe you, but just take good care of this person. And the key was that they were patient enough to look around, to be present, and they weren't worried. I think we're so worried about, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources. I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to get to point A to point B. I'm too busy. That scarcity comes in so many different forms and fashion than just scarcity of not having physical things. It can be a scarcity of time.
Well, I think what's interesting too in that story is Jesus uses a marginalized person to be the hero of the story, and he also the Good Samaritan, I think, is the story you're talking about. This Good Samaritan cares not at all about getting credit. So, I see a lot of nonprofit work being done, and it's great. But I mean, so much about making a difference in the kingdom of God, I think, and bringing justice is to not care who gets the credit and to serve behind the scenes and to really. And this was a good word for me when I first started out on this kind of work is you're not the answer. Yes. You're not the answer. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, in the community where you might be going to serve, there's probably people there who've been working for many, many years trying. I would imagine that Mother Teresa didn't come in with all new approach. Mm-hmm. She probably came alongside the people who were already there doing the work. And she came in with this beautiful word called humility. I'm glad you joined us today. Thanks for catching the vision with us. And if you want to help support Together What If, you can go to gfumc.com/give. And you can also help us build online bridges to Christ by liking and sharing this podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, 3 in 1. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to to reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for the sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, all the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel and shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who is resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.